הטובה שלי, את אוזנך תינה לי, חלום מוזר עשה אליי דרכו, חרש בשנתי תמן זרעו.
Shalom. Welcome to Hayom. I'm Rabbi Arnold Rachlis. Hayom in Hebrew means today, and this is a show about contemporary events in Jewish life. Today's program is about singles in the Jewish community. And you know, at one time, being single meant being someone waiting to be married, or someone between marriages, but there was a very low divorce rate in Jewish life a generation ago, or somebody who was a widow or a widower. But today, the issue of singles is becoming a dominant one in the Jewish community, as many people are choosing to be single, as people are marrying later, as the divorce rate has increased. So we have a large singles community in the Jewish community, and there's a need to serve them. But before the Jewish community can know how to serve them, they have to know a little bit about the diversity of singles. And we have a panel today of 4 singles who are diverse and hopefully also are articulate. We have with us Alan Feinberg. Alan is an attorney. He was active in his earlier years with the New Left and has begun to get involved in the Jewish community again. Gail Prince works for the Mayor Kaplan Jewish Community Center in Skokie and works with a group called Singles Panorama, which programs for singles all over the Chicago area. Norm Gross is an attorney in Chicago. Lots of Jewish attorneys, huh? Norm is an attorney in Chicago and is co-chair of the Young Leadership Division of the Jewish United Fund, a group that works with both singles and married under the age of 40. Ellen Passman works as a catering sales manager for a hotel in Chicago, has a background in theater, and also is active with Makom, which was an alternative coffee house synagogue in Chicago a number of years ago. Well, we're happy to have all of you here, and I'd like to begin with Ellen. Before the show began, you said to me, life can be beautiful for a woman who is single and Jewish and over 30. What did you mean by that?
Well, it's a life that I've chosen partly by circumstance and partly because that seems to be a viable way to live. I never believed in that transitional period that you were talking about. I think I bought it when I was in my early 20s and said, oh my God, I'm 23 and not married. Oh my God, I'm 24 and not married. And about 25, I thought that I was beginning to choose my own way of life, and I chose my Judaism. Life chose that I should be over 30, and that was fine with me because I'm one of those people that hits their prime in their 30s, and I'm not waiting for my life to start. I feel that I have a lot to offer, and I have now the maturity to be able to give to young Jewish people in their 20s who are looking around going, now what's going to happen? And I feel now I'm still learning it. I have something to be able to give now, and I find that very exciting.
Let me ask Alan the same question. Can life be beautiful for a man who is single, Jewish, and in his 30s?
Of course, I agree. I feel that these last few years in my 30s have been among the most joyous times for myself. I'm at a position where my business, I'm self-employed, is in a satisfactory state that I could explore other avenues without worrying about a profit motive. I've become involved in Jewish activities, and that gives me additional fulfillment. I meet some interesting people that way, and
what kinds of Jewish activities are you doing?
Well, lately I've been serving on the board of directors of Lincoln Park Lakeview JCC. It's a newer Jewish community center that's been established in Chicago, and I serve on the adult program committee, and this is the adult singles group, which has a certain stigma attached by using singles, so we call it the adult program committee. But it gives me a chance to plan adult events that are interesting to me and I feel would be interesting to my friends, and to attract people who are otherwise unaffiliated in the Jewish community, to give some sense of involvement or some brush with the Jewish community.
The neighborhood that the Lakeview JCC is in has a really large Jewish singles population. Do you know about how
Right.
many there are?
The Jewish Federation did a survey recently, and there are about 10,000 Jewish singles in their 20s and 30s in this area, and we're trying to attract as many as possible into our programming.
Gail, let me ask you, you are involved with Singles Panorama, and you work with singles from ages 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and up.
We stop at 59.
At 59. What kinds of differences do you see between singles who are younger, late 20s, early 30s, and those who are in their late 40s, early 50s?
Differences, mainly a single who's divorced or widowed has to reestablish a sense of self. They're single again, and they have to decide, what am I going to do with me? And start thinking about how I'm going to put my life together. That's the 40, 50-year-old, late 30-year-old person who's divorced or widowed. They have to develop a whole new support system for themselves. They haven't had to do that for a while, possibly. Support system in terms of maybe new single friends. They have to move back into the social scene, something they might have not done for 15 or 20 years, something that's very scary and difficult for them.
How does Singles Panorama help them do that?
Singles Panorama, as you've stated briefly, programs separately for 3 age categories: 20s and 30s, 30s and 40s, and 40s and 50s. And we program a variety of kinds of things, anywhere from social activities to lecture discussions, to discussions on Judaism. And how we help a single to move back is to create an environment that makes them feel comfortable coming into a situation like a JCC, and where they can start to meet and develop new friends.
Norm, have you gone to singles programs like this? Are you involved in a formal sense in singles groups, or do you meet people outside of groups primarily?
Well, because I am co-chairman of Singles Leadership for Jewish Federation, the great majority of meetings, social affairs, cultural affairs, etc., that I go to are associated with the Singles Leadership Group. It's interesting, your initial question, because I think it's easier being single and being in your 30s than it is being Jewish. I think that's the most difficult of the 3 characteristics that you mentioned, because generally speaking, the Jewish community has done too little in bringing the single community into the Jewish community. And I think that the recent establishment of the JCC in the Lakeview area is an indication of steps in that regard. I think that the Singles Leadership Group of Federation is another example of something that's been done. But I think that if we trace the genesis of these activities, it would more likely be traced to the singles leadership themselves rather than the older Jewish community. They're important initial steps, and I think we're making inroads in terms of the overall Jewish community. But I'm not sure that they yet truly understand the phenomena that's occurring and exactly how to respond to it.
What kinds of things would you like to see? What kinds of programs? Who should program? Synagogues, JCCs, Federation, independent singles groups?
Well, I think that the first thing that has to be done, I think there's some preliminary steps that I'll discuss generally before I talk about what can be done. Specifically, the stigma has to be removed. I think it was an appropriate question that you asked, but somehow, if someone is single, there's some negative connotations associated with that. Also, I think that the older community, generally speaking, when they think of a single, thinks of singles in their 20s. Now, certainly, I think that people in their 30s in this day and age are well established. We can only have to refer to our director of the Office of Management and Budget at the national level to note the impact that people in their 30s are having on the political, social, economic scene in this country. So I think that an important first step is to have more acceptance of the single in the Jewish community. And once that's done, and once there's more understanding, I think we'll also move from what has generally been socially oriented programs to a broader range of programs that include educational programs. Too many of the singles community that I've come into contact with really want to learn more about their Jewishness, and there aren't that many opportunities for them to gain that knowledge. They want to become more culturally aware. They want their leadership development skills established so that they can contribute more to the Jewish community. They don't want just social affairs, and this is why within Federation Singles leadership, we have very few affairs that are purely social. All of them have to have some sort of educational, cultural, leadership development component.
Do you think that a program that's purely social puts undue pressure on the people who come to it? In other words, it sort of becomes a transparent substitute for a bar or a party if there isn't any other program. But by having some other kind of program, the focus is the educational or cultural program, and if something social develops, that's nice, but people don't have to come in feeling that.
Absolutely. You talked about the 10,000 people, 10,000 singles that were in the near north area. Well, what sense of Jewish community do they have? And what opportunities are given to them to have a sense of community, to feel a part of the Chicago Jewish community? That's an element that going to bars or just simply attending social affairs does not provide. The single doesn't only want attachment to another person and other people. On the whole, that's right. They also want attachment to the Jewish community, and in the great tradition of the Jews, they usually want attachments to the community at large, too. And these are the things that I think have to be done.
Ellen was involved with Makom.
That's exactly what I wanted to
Tell us
bring
a little
up.
bit about it, because I don't know how many people know about
Makom
it.
started out as an idea for some prominent Jewish leaders responded to the need of people in the Lakeview area singles, and we started out on division on the second floor of over some storefronts, and we started out on the floor, and there were about 20, then there were about 30, then there were about 60, and this was only on Shabbat. It began to gain momentum during the summer, and on the high holidays, I cannot tell you what happened. We were at the Second Unitarian Church, and my reaction was, my God, the Jews are coming out of the woodwork. We were absolutely hungry for it. And you had mentioned something about these social events of transparency, and, you know, do break in on these because you probably felt the same thing. What Makom eliminated at first, because man is, or woman is a natural animal, and they get into that, it was an opportunity where you could just be yourself. It had a little bit of the feeling of a youth group, where the kids were more interested in the whole cultural and friend attachment and not having to get a date or meeting someone. They were there for themselves, and because they were there to satisfy themselves, they could then reach out to someone else. And it was beautiful. One of the things that I think the established Jewish community could respond to, and in a very natural way, is Shabbat. One of our most successful things at Makom was Sabbath services, and there are any number of synagogues in the Lakeview area, the near north area, that can have Shabbat services, and not for singles, because that, I think, is unnatural. I think it should be Shabbat services for everyone. Invite a certain group, perhaps, that is not affiliated. But I don't want to spend my life knowing other people who are single only. My life is fulfilled by having married friends, having older friends, having college friends, having kid friends. And Shabbat is a natural, non-threatening place to do it. And that might be a very, and an Oneg Shabbat.
But there are synagogues in the near north side. So
But
what's the reason that singles
we
in large numbers aren't
haven't
going
knocked
there?
on their door and said, we would like to know, we would like to be part of your Shabbat, and we would like you, we don't want to come into your house of worship as strangers. What can we do to prime the pump? And when we get there, we won't be chicken, and your congregants should be welcoming us. I mean, that
I
used
would want to
happen.
mention that there are services at several near north synagogues on Friday night.
Where the whole congregation mixes, or is it just for singles?
Well, it's an important start. Anshe Emet, as I understand, because I am not one of the founders of this series of Friday night services, usually does not offer regular Friday night services. And so several of my colleagues on the YLD board, David Bronner and Steve Gaifman, approached the rabbi at Anshe Emet and asked to have twice a month services for the young Jewish community.
Married or single.
Married or single. And certainly they don't exclude anyone who comes in through the door. And they've tried through the reader and through other means to announce. Well, I think that they've had a good turnout. I think, though, that what's needed is that these aren't the only services that are available. What needs to happen is that all of the synagogues, because here again, you had two young Jews, by the way, both married, who approached the synagogue. It wasn't the synagogue approaching them. And
Right.
I think in most instances it is the singles community that takes the lead in establishing these types of services or programs or whatever. And I think there's really a need for the established leaders in the community
to make it back and forth.
to make
To extend
meeting
an
the needs
invitation to...
meeting the needs of singles has to become a priority in the Jewish community.
Alan's involved with the Lakeview JCC. What kinds of outreach have you done to other singles in the community, and how have the synagogues in that area reached out to you? Has there been that cross-fertilization?
Well, in that we're a new organization, we're counting on our own members and our friends, people on our mailing list, to add names to our mailing list. We have a very large mailing list, much larger than, of course, our membership, and we encourage people who aren't members to take part in our activities. They pay a little bit extra surcharge for the activities, and then we hope to get them as members. But it's mainly the people we know, the people who we meet, we add to our mailing list to try to make it a more personal touch.
Have you ever tried plastering the near north side with posters, or flooding the reader, the underground paper, with advertisements?
That's been done. We have some ongoing programs, volleyball, basketball, Israeli dancing in the evenings. We have a gym, and those things are advertised in the reader. The adult programming, where we have cultural events, intellectual events, discussions, where the attendance is limited, we try to go to the people who've shown an interest, the people who will be active with us, will support our activities, and approach them on an individual basis and induce them to attend these events.
I want to ask Gail, I want to shift the focus a little bit now. Okay? You know, there's a Yiddish saying, "Schwer zu sein a Yid." It's hard to be a Jew. I think there has to be a side of being a single that's difficult too. And I'd like to ask you directly, not the advantages or not how free life is or how comfortable you can be in your 30s, but what are the disadvantages of being single?
The disadvantages of being single could be that a whole new life has to be established, a whole new way of thinking has to be established, a whole sense of self has to be thought over again. I'm no longer married. So who am I going to be? What is this person? Who am I going to emerge? What's going to emerge? As I said before, going out and developing a whole new set of friends is a very difficult, scary kind of thing.
How do you encourage people to do that?
Well,
or how did you do it yourself?
Well, first of all, one thing I must say is that I encourage the people that I talk with certainly to maintain their married friends. To give up married friends is really a disservice. So they need to encourage their married friends to stay to stay friendly with them and to be a part of what their life is, their ongoing life. Another way I encourage singles is to go out and become a part of the community, whether it be single community or encourage them to become interested in something they've never tried before. I've always wanted to be a photographer. Well, this is the time. I started writing poetry when I first became single. Again, that's a talent that I didn't think I had, but I do, and I write.
Who did you find that you could rely on when you were first divorced? Were they friends that you had when you were part of a couple? Were they other women? Who were your best friends at that time?
When I first became divorced, I had no single friends. So that meant that I needed to develop friendships along that line. I frequently kid about the best fix-up I ever had was a married friend of mine introduced me to another girlfriend, single girlfriend, and she and I started palling around together. I think it's important to have a single friend, at least to go places with, because it's difficult moving into a new scene that you've never experienced by yourself.
Have you tried things that were difficult, like going to singles bars or any kinds of dating programs or anything like that?
I've tried almost everything. My belief, not only personally, but when I talk to singles and work with singles, is that you can't close off any option. All options are viable. And if you sit in the house and stare at the walls, that's as far as things are going to go. You need to be out. And it takes a little guts and it takes a little chutzpah, but you need to be out there. So bars, of course I've sat in bars. I've tried, at one time there was a quote dating service called Video Dates. And I did that with the encouragement from my family to try that. And I still have friends from that experience. I go to dances, I went to dances. Anything and everything that I would suggest to a single to do, I've done.
Does your role as a programmer or a social worker at the Kaplan J get in the way, or does it facilitate meeting other people? You're a single running singles programs. Is that a barrier or is that an advantage?
It's basically neither, because I don't make it something that it's not. My job is to be a professional person to the community. Do I meet single men through the organization? On the whole, I don't choose to do that because it's dangerous. That's not a posture that I want to maintain. I have met some lovely single women by being involved in single programming.
Let me broaden this question for the rest of you too. How do you meet people? We started to get into this before and somehow we got sidetracked. Do you meet them through friends? Do you get fixed up with people you know at work? How do you meet people? Alan, let's go with you.
Fortunately, I haven't had a great deal of difficulty in that area. I've lived in Chicago my whole life. I have many friends that I've...
What school do you go to? What neighborhood are you from?
Well, true. I went to college in Illinois. I went to law school in Chicago. And I have many friends who are always calling me up. Do I have a girl for you? And I just wish I had enough time to, explore all those possibilities. So, fortunately, it hasn't been that difficult for me, I'm happy to say.
The double standard still exists. Unfortunately, it does. Not quite in the same extreme as it used to. Women are much more assertive and aggressive, and I say that very positively. But men, as a whole, as a group, do not have as much difficulty dating as women do. And I'm talking about high-functioning, sophisticated people. They just don't.
Is that partially because as men get older, they sort of continue to go out with the younger women? Men in their 40s or 50s can sometimes comfortably go out with women in their 20s or early 30s. So there was an article a few months ago in a national Jewish magazine, in Moment magazine, that asked, are good Jewish men a vanishing breed? And just on the numbers game alone, women ended up on the short end of the stick.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. On the other side, that article I also think pointed out that women now are looking to younger men. Right. a woman in her, here's to you, Mrs.
Well,
Robinson.
Ellen said absolutely with a lot of assertiveness and strength. Where do you meet people, Ellen?
Through your job, through friends. I'm also from Chicago. Networking. One thing that helped me with, let's say, the stigma is I looked around and said, would I like you as a friend? Would I like you as a friend? Would I get along with you? And then I worry about the dating aspect later. There is a look on a person's face when they're looking that I promised myself I would never have. Because I decided the first person you need to get satisfied with is yourself. And then you can look around and be a friend to someone else, and be a lover to someone else, and be a companion to someone else. And you brought up a very good point that is helping single women today, is that we have gotten out of that competitiveness, or we're slowly getting out of the competitiveness. And I will no longer, if I don't have a date, and 2 weeks ago I planned Saturday night that a woman friend of mine, that I was going to a movie and to dinner with Gail, and I enjoy her company, and Alan called me, I would say, hey, I really can't do it because I value Gail's friendship and I'm not going to dump her. Now, I can talk to Gail, and if Alan wants to come along, terrific, but I think we are not putting ourselves in that little box anymore. I noticed the difference in when I was about 18 or 19, I went to Europe, and the kids traveled in groups, and there wasn't this stigma, and I came home to a blind date. You sat in the dorm and died on a Friday night, and if you were really into the game, someone called you Friday for Friday, you sat in the dorm like a fool because you wouldn't go out. And I think we're getting much more natural. I will look at Alan and Norman now as a human being, not as a potential date or a husband. I will look at them as human beings. I feel more comfortable, not as threatened, and perhaps they don't either.
In an ideal relationship, let's say like an ideal marriage, and granted,
Is there one?
I was going to say, granted, there are some really good marriages and some marriages aren't so good. But in an ideal marriage, when partners come home at the end of the day, they share their concerns, they share their frustrations on the job, or frustrations from home.
Is playing in the background and the martinis are mixed.
Well, you see, I would say, Ellen, though, that your edge of sarcasm is somewhat revealing maybe about your disbelief that can happen. And I'll deal with that in a second, but I'm just going to stay on this question for a second. Okay. But I think in an ideal relationship, there is a lot of support and caring, and the great thing about it is it's continuous and ongoing. And I'm wondering where people who are single, and I'll direct this to Norm, if he doesn't mind, or even if he does mind.
That's the dark side. That is the dark side.
Where's the continuity? When you come home at the end of the day, it's a day full of tsuris, it's a really hard day, you want someone to share with. Who do you call? Whose house do you go over? Is it the same person or the same group of people each time? Where's the continuity?
Well, I guess there are several ways of answering that. First of all, there's different outlets that I think you discover for yourself, given your particular situation. I think that the most natural outlet for a married person would be the mate, as you say it, assuming that it was the type of communication taking place in the marriage that allowed for that type of exchange. I think that for the single person generally, assuming that they're not living with someone, would probably be a variety of people, but I think that most singles have their good friends.
Extended family?
Or extended family also. But then, as I said, there are other outlets that the single might take advantage of or might be able to take advantage of that someone who is married might not. One of the outlets for me is sports. Now, if I was married, I might not necessarily be able to come home at the end of the day and then go jog for a number of miles. I might have other responsibilities that would preclude me from doing that, or would preclude me from following through on other alternatives that might or might not involve other people.
But do you miss, and I'll ask this really of anyone, do you miss that ongoing companionship with one other person who would be there for you and who you could be there for? Ellen?
I think when you said what are the disadvantages, that is probably the dark side. That and your feet are cold at night and you kind of wish they weren't. And that continuity is involved in that. You come home and you go, and there's not anyone there. I think a professional single will form an extended family. Not that same person, but there are times that you come home and you don't want to share it. I think that continuity sometimes becomes a trap as well. So I'm not sure. In its most ideal sense, I would say that's the sad part of singlehood, is the lack of continuity and the investment over the years. And you come home and your mate takes one look at you and hands you the chicken soup, and you feel better, and you don't have to have the smile on and have the personality on, and you could just come home and collapse and someone loves you.
I want to open up the question of sexuality, too, for singles. You know, the single community is full of a lot of different kinds, and now I'll just talk about heterosexuality for a minute, but it's open to you know, a range of different sexual behaviors, from people who condone one-night stands to those who say, well, if I've known a person this long, or under these situations, or given these factors...
Or if his sign is right.
Or if the sign is right. But how do you make those determinations? You know, when is sex right with someone to whom you're not married? What are the situations? How do you make those determinations? Does ethics enter into it at all? What kind of ethical decision? Alan says no.
Now, that is one thing that drives me nuts. Now, you have all been, I have never been married. And I have been hungry, I have been angry, I have been anxious, I have been scared, I have been aggressive, I have been nuts about that entire subject. Because as far as I'm concerned, I'm a nice Jewish girl, and nice Jewish girls don't have 3 different guys in 1 week. However, you spend your week and a lot of different circumstances happen, and you have to go through some fancy rationalization because I'm a nice Jewish girl. And I'm not giving that up. And now I don't buy going to a bar and going home with a stranger. I think that there may be circumstances that happens. I think in a big city, it is just dangerous. I think psychologically it's damaging, it's ego damaging, and that's not real healthy. But I think your best barometer is guts, common sense, and I said to one guy, he made some kind of remark, and I said, sorry, I'm an old-fashioned girl, and he perked right up. And I thought, geez, there's somebody still out there. And another time, somebody came out and remember the old expression, you don't kiss on the first date? I said, I'm terribly sorry, but I don't do it on the first date. And he just backed off, because you have to really, they're tossing lines at you, and you have to toss lines back. And I walk out of a situation like that. I think your best barometer is do I want to share my sexuality, my heart, my intimacy with that person? And if not, thanks for the martini, goodbye.
Okay, only a smirky Alan over here. Big broad smile, of course. Seriously, what enters into the equation of when to have sex, with whom?
It's a matter of being comfortable. It's a matter of enjoying a person's company. It comes with experiences. I've been single for close to 10 years now, since I've been divorced, and it's my entire adult experience to be single. And it's being comfortable. It's not only a question of sexuality, it's a question of compatibility. It's easy to have sex, and it's difficult to be able to talk to a person.
Absolutely.
So once, you know, that idea, you know, enters into the mind, it's a combination of factors that are important. And it's, again, it's what you feel comfortable with. It's trying a variety of experiences.
Do any of you have rules like you stay away from married people? I mean, are there some sort of boundaries, you know, that sexually I'm talking about, that you would never consider an affair with someone who is married, a relationship with someone who's married?
I have a personal saying, never say never, but...
That's very profound, Alan. It's very... I have a question. Do guys really go through that whole thought process? I mean, are there two different approaches? Because I believe it all to be the thought process, but I'm getting smarter now that I've gotten older.
As to what?
Well, either just hitting on someone or going through that, is that someone I can talk to, that comfort. Do men take the time? Because I don't always get that.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask Alan not to answer this for a moment because I want to open it up to our audience. We have a studio audience with us here, and I'm going to give them a chance to ask some questions.
Okay, please.
But I would like to open this question up for the audience at large. And so why don't we begin that way? We'll stay away from you people for a moment. It's a provocative question that we should begin, but for those of you in this audience who are single, how do you make those? Who'd like to go first? Do you have any volunteers? Decisions on sexual relations. This is cowardly.
It's kind of a difficult situation for anybody. I think they covered it very well. I'm in sales, and the question in sales, when do you try and close a sale? And the answer has always been too early and too often. And, you have to wonder sometimes, being, you know, male and having normal feelings, that's not a bad idea, but what does it do for me emotionally? And generally not much. And it's much more satisfying to find someone you can carry on a conversation with and enjoy spending some time with.
How do people here want to answer that question? How do you make decisions like that?
I think for me it depends on the woman. It seems that there's a few different attitudes working here. For people who really are at ease with themselves, I think if it's going to happen, it just happens naturally. There's a presumption I find among some women, especially Jewish women, that all Jewish men are on the make, which they may well be, but somehow that's like having there's a certain negative connotation that's very unfair. I don't believe that there's any difference between men and women in that. There's a difference in the role, but I don't believe there's any difference. I think it just happens naturally.
There's a big stereotype, though, that that men in bars are always trying to make it with the single women there, and the women are always getting hassled. I mean, is that a true stereotype? Because sometimes I wonder. You know, I've heard from people who are single. They'll say something like, I don't want to go into a bar scene because either if it's a man, they'll say, because everybody will think I'm being really obnoxious and wearing all this heavy jewelry and asking what's your sign and all that. And women say, I don't want to go there because it's too much of a hassle. Is that really what it's like? Is it sort of a dog-eat-dog world out there in the world of single bars, or is it a defense that people who are single guard themselves against going into situations like that because they're afraid it really is going to be like that? Who's got single bar experience here?
I'd like to look at it from the other standpoint. Okay. I don't go to single bars. Maybe I did it once or twice or something like that with a couple of friends, post-college friends, but I don't go to them because I don't want to be put in the position where the woman that I'm approaching is thinking that I'm on the make, because that's not my general inclined position.
Where do you go to meet people?
Well, plug for JUF, but I meet them there. I meet them at social events like that, if I take a class or something like that. Meet them in my work. Meet them through other friends.
Have you ever thought that maybe the people that you're meeting in the bars that you think are worried that you're on the make are also on the make?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
That's it. I mean, it works both ways.
We all had some advice before the show. She said to me, you always tell people to go out and do things that are difficult, like your video date service. Have you heard that a lot? People who are just afraid to try new ways to meet people?
Oh, no question about that. It's scary, and it's risky, and you're feeling vulnerable. And I really feel that there's a whole mythology around singles bars. I really don't think that people are there on the make. I really don't feel that way. And I think it's just another alternative to meeting people. And I think it's an attitude that's been perpetuated by not only singles, but by the married community too. People go to singles bars because it's another alternative. And many times when women, as well as men, and I think that we need to talk a little bit about men's attitudes. It's always been, as this gentleman referred to, that men are always supposed to be ready. And many men have come to me and say, hey, I want to say no, but what are people going to think about me? I'm not considered masculine. But I don't want to take any girl home, you know, with the aggressive, assertive lady out there now. Women are asking the same kinds of questions that men used to ask. At any rate, frequently when a woman will ask me, how can I go into a singles bar? I say to them, all you need to know is one word, and that's no.
Anyone have a question of people in our panel? All right.
I'd like to know if there is anybody who really by choice would like to remain single.
Okay, anyone up there who would like to remain single?
I would at this point in time, for me.
Why?
Forever and ever, or just now?
I can only talk about now. I can't consider forever and ever. I was married 11 years. I've been divorced 4.5, and I enjoy being single. I'm not telling you that I wouldn't want to be in a committed relationship, but I don't think of a committed relationship necessarily as a married relationship. I enjoy my singleness and the space that it gives me.
How about someone else?
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question. If you don't agree, are you agreeing with the other point of view? What I've tried to do for myself is to say, no matter what happens, I'll be happily single or I'll be happily married.
Right.
I think you have to leave alternatives for yourself. You have to leave options.
Do you feel at peace with yourself?
Yes, I do.
Norm, you too? I mean, do you feel like if you remain single for the rest of your life, that's okay? Or do you feel you'll miss out on a lot of things and maybe you should hurry up and get married because things will slip away?
Well, I don't presume to speak for anybody up here, but it seems to me as though we all feel as though certainly if the circumstances arose whereby we met someone and marriage seemed to be the right course of action and whatever, we would certainly make that decision. We wouldn't shrink from that decision. I think that we've mentioned a number of things that are inherent in a good marriage, including bringing up a family and having a family. And I know that's something that I'd like to do, but I am not going to take that step until I know that it's the right step to take.
We have another question.
I'd just like to know about women, how they feel about going out with a man and having this man date 3 or 4 or 5 other women.
Turn the question around.
Turn the
question around.
Okay, fine. I mean, do you want to feel special? Do you, go on.
Ellen?
I want to feel special when I'm with him, and I will make him feel special when he's with me. And I will be dating 4 or 5 other people. He will be dating 4 or 5 other people. If we have a special relationship, we can perhaps talk about other experiences and to bring us closer together. And at one point or another, I think you have to make that decision.
You enjoy hearing about his experiences?
No, I don't want to know about
women?
his experiences, but if I am not so foolish to think that if he's going out with me and he's got anything on the ball, that he's not dating 3 or 4 other people. But I'm going to be doing the same thing. I'm not going to stay home and say he's only for me.
I think a lot has to do with the way where you are in your singleness, your state of mind. When I first became single, for me, I needed to go out and date a lot. And that was the place that I was at 4.5 years ago. 4.5 years later, for me, I need to be with one man.
No, you don't.
Let me ask you this. Are you single?
Yes.
Why? Why do you think you're single still?
Why am I single?
Yeah, by choice or what?
Because I'm very picky. I date a lot, but I won't commit myself.
What are you looking for?
I enjoy my independence. And what am I looking for?
Perfection.
I have a list.
But have you never met anyone who filled that list?
It's ironic, but I find I don't go to bars that often, and when I do meet men, it's in very awkward situations. It might be underneath, in a pool, walking on the street. I just enjoy, and that's when I find that relationship really works out, and I have a good time.
I would say I would go back to the one person, but I wouldn't. I think it becomes a choice. It says the relationship. If the relationship warrants it, then we would choose to be with each other. I wouldn't arbitrarily say because you're dating the specialness of little me that you can't go out with these other people, just as I would not want that restriction.
We've got another question here.
I think the main point is really in a forced situation. Singles bars are a forced situation. I have tried, I've had some marvelous times, I've met some very, very good friends who I'm still friends with, women as well as men. But I think we all have the fear, it's still I think the Jewish mothers and the guilt that we always
Well, what is that guilt? You know, let's not knock the Jewish mother, and at least not until we're accurate on why to do it. What's the guilt?
I can speak of myself and naturally many, many others who I'm sure will identify. I am an Israeli, and I think in Israel it is easier to be felt right now, even more so than the States. In Israel, if you're 22 and not married or ready to be married, something is wrong with you. And I have an aunt visiting right now from Israel, and we had a discussion about that, and she said, you know, I'd rather have my daughter marry early and then divorce later than stay a single woman until she's 30 years old. So I felt the pressure as I was growing up, through the army and through college, and then I came to the U.S., and my eyes really opened up. I saw that suddenly I can be a person. First of all, I was alone, I was by myself, and I was able to construct my very own life. And here I had all these choices, the new people who I met, and new places to go, and career opportunities. And suddenly I felt not like a half person who is waiting for the second half to join together, but just like a whole person. I can start something brand new. It's all for me. I'm doing my growing up. And the fact is that I would love to be married, and I love children. I'm sure I will be a wonderful mother. The point is I have to be ready. Right now I'm still growing, I'm still developing. I feel very good about myself, finally, as a whole.
It brings up a good point that people develop their personalities at different paces, and some people may not want to ever get married. Others may want to get married in their 20s, in their 30s. You've got to be ready. You've got to know you're ready.
I think it has to come from yourself. I think exactly what you said. If she's 20 in Israel, the national pastime, I was there as a single person at 25. Everybody was trying to marry me off, and it was bizarre. And the pressure, I loved Israel, but I couldn't wait to get out of there.
Let me ask you, who else feels pressure to get? We have a lot of singles here in this audience. Who feels pressure to get married? Anybody? To change your status? Everybody feels no pressure at all?
I think that there's some natural social pressure, and when we talk about Jewishness, which is after all the subject we're trying to talk about, I guess I'd like to reinforce what Norm is saying. The establishment expects people to be married. So there is some natural social pressure that may not have anything to do with Jewish mothers, parents, or particular institutions, but the world is basically coupled off and married.
Why do you think you're not married now?
I'm not married now because I don't want to be. Being married or getting married would be very easy, and I know that sounds cocky, and it's hard for some people to understand. It's hard for married people to understand, more so than single people, but having a good marriage is much more difficult, and really that's what it's all about. I have a question, if I can ask one, to Ellen. I think that it seems to me there's a myth operating here, at least in my mind there's a myth. You talked about people going out with 4 or 5 people, 6, I don't remember what the number was. I know a lot of single people who are very socially active, and I don't think I know anybody that goes out with 4 or 5 people at the same time and really has serious relationships.
Oh, okay.
I'd like to know what the panel thinks about that.
All right, I would definitely agree with that. You may have 1 or 2, you may be dating one person, having another, I would say 2 or 3, and then maybe friends that you are close to. All right, let me expand that and go a little deeper, that maybe you would have friends or other people or other circumstances to keep you from that one, you know, relationship. Maybe I'm going to be very active on the board, and Alan and I spend a lot of time together, and I'm in the programming. Well, that may not be a dating situation, but that is a time-consuming, energy-consuming thing. I think basically the one of the questions was, you know, do you choose to be with one person, or do you value your freedom and the option to explore the different avenues?
It's probably a natural progress, actually. We don't decide, okay, today I'm going to start going with one person, or yesterday I was a completely free person.
Choice between
you
two
develop
people.
your relationships out of different situations.
And other things fall away, or
exactly,
you choose not
and things
to deal with
either
it.
fall into place or they don't. But you
Let me ask a question of Gail. It's not a personal question. This is a question of your capacity as somebody who works with people who have been divorced and have children. Sometimes you hear a child say, a young child say, my mom's boyfriend lives with us. What's really going on? You hear a lot of that. What's going on with the children who live under a roof with one parent and the parent's partner? Is it messing up children? Are children accommodating it to it well? Can you give us some inclination?
I can't profess to be the expert on a question like that. First of all, I don't hear very much of that. I hear some of it, that people, boyfriend and girlfriend living together with the children. I think with divorce as prevalent as it is now, children are much more aware of their friends' parents being divorced. I mean, my son David used to be the only, years ago, used to be the only child coming out of a divorce. Now he's got many friends that he brings home that are out of divorced homes. It's a touchy subject. Your whole sexuality, sensuality, in terms of your children, how much do you show that to a child? How much should a child be exposed to something like that? Should a child see a variety of partners moving in and out of a house?
Well, how would you advise someone? Because I'm going to go back to this question of values again, and when I say ethics or values, I don't mean moralisms. I mean just an approach to, you know, not little maxims or strict guidelines, but how do you advise someone to make a responsible decision that is fair to the person involved and fair to the children involved in that kind of situation?
Cautiously. Cautiously. Children are very vulnerable. I personally, and I can only talk personally, would not want my son to see a variety of people moving in and out of my door thinking that they were going into my bedroom. That is not something I would choose for my son.
Can I say that there's another element to be considered? In Illinois, there's been a recent Illinois Supreme Court case that held that cohabitation in itself is grounds for a parent to lose custody of their children. So there's that additional element of caution involved.
Yeah, so you're addressing it legally, but I was
True.
just saying basically on the values involved.
You also don't want a child not to see you as a sexual human being. That's doing the child a disservice also. To pretend that you're a celibate is certainly not giving your child another side of who you are. That's not fair either. So delicately, it's a balance, a delicate balance.
Norm?
Yes, I had a question. We've been talking a lot about singleness and sensuality and whatever that I think can cut across to any group. I'd like to pose a question to this audience. One of the statements that I made initially was that beyond the need of singles to be socially involved, etc., is to be Jewishly involved, to be culturally involved, to learn more about their Jewishness, etc. And so I'd like to pose as a general question to our audience, turning the tables a little bit, since many of them are singles, what are their needs in terms of Jewishness, Jewish education, culture, religion, etc.? And how do they think that the community at large can meet those needs?
Good question. Who wants to take a shot at an answer?
I know. I'm just moving into West Rogers Park, and I had a choice between a couple of communities I could have moved to. I could have moved into Lincoln Park Lakeview, or I could have moved to East Rogers Park. But I chose West Rogers Park. A lot of my friends from college happen to be there. Some of them are married, some of them aren't. But there's a very, very strong Jewish community there. There are stores that are owned by Jews. There are Jewish stores for Judaica, as well as for food, shopping, things like that. So there's a whole support system that's there that I don't think is maybe anywhere else in the city, that maybe is as strong, that may exist in Lincoln Park Lakeview in terms of the people that are there, but in terms of the whole community, it's not there. So that's one thing that you need to be a part of your community, is the community has got to be there for you, or you've got to build it. The other thing is the amount of synagogues that are in West Rogers Park. There's a choice of people to meet in that sense. I happen to have moved right into a neighborhood where Congregation KINS is, and for a number of years they've had a young adult minyan or service, whatever, and I've moved in specifically into that area to be near that synagogue. Those are the types of things that I'm looking for, the types of support that I want.
Someone else? What can the Jewish community do for singles? I mean, makom, Ellen earlier in the show spoke about makom, this great idea for a alternative kind of synagogue, coffee house, a place where people could have relationships that weren't just for the purpose of dating, but through Judaism, through Jewish culture and religion, could have a much more solid foundation of friendships and those kinds of bonds. Well, what happened to makom? Is there a need for a new makom?
No, I think it was, what was unnatural was that it was for singles, by singles, and mostly in their 20s, and a lot of us didn't know where we were coming from, where we were going. It was in a very transitional time. The idea was good, but that idea can be filtered into hundreds of synagogues. Makom can live in each synagogue. It doesn't have to be a separate entity.
Well, sometimes, though, you hear people say, and I think with some justification, that synagogues are structured for people with children.
Let's change it.
And you hear less and less that synagogues are structured just for married people, but certainly people with children, people who don't have children yet or who are not going to have children.
Now that programming is changing. I teach at Temple Sholem.
Okay.
Say that. They have a very, very active, starting from an educational place. They have young rabbis. They have a tremendous educational thing on Sundays. The kids are going to Sunday school, the parents are going to Sunday school, the singles are going to Sunday school, and people are meeting people. And then once you get involved, then you start coming on Shabbat, and then you start coming, and it's a giving of the people who are visiting, it's a giving of the congregation. I think we are isolated enough in thousands of other areas. I don't think that should be continued in the synagogues, in the Jewish establishment, and I think it can break.
Well, there's a lot more to discuss. We're not going to get a chance to do it today, but I want to thank our four guests, Alan Feinberg, Gail Prince, Norm Gross, Ellen Passman. I want to thank the audience for being responsive, and I'm sure we'll have time to talk about this again. I want to say to all of you, please join us again on Hayom. We'll be probing a lot of subjects of interest to the contemporary Jewish community. This is Arnold Rachlis wishing you shalom.
אפלה טובה שלי, את אוזנך תינה לי, חלום מוזר עשה אליי דרכו, חרש בשנתי תמן זרעו, החזון שבמוחי הוטמן בלט, והוא עוד שם. מי אני בודד